We're going to do this work on the relapse with a view to discovering some of the problems, but more important, the possibilities that restoration comedy offers. And I feel, I'd just like to lay my cards on the table about it straight away. I feel that a lot of us actors have a lot of dreads, a lot of anxieties about certain kinds of drama. But in fact, my experience is that as an actor, I was really quite frightened of Shakespeare before I came to play it, and particularly frightened of Restoration comedy, because one kind of felt, I think this is a feeling which still prevails, that there's a sort of trick to it, or a magic to it, or perhaps even a kind of gift of personality which you need to have before you can play Restoration comedy. And the first thing that one hits one's toe against is language, and a kind of elevated comic language, which is always difficult, I think, for modern actors, because we've been very much brought up to always find the realistic truth in things. One is in a kind of limbo immediately, and you start grabbing for things. You see threads running through most of the Restoration plots. Many of them are concerned with fortunes, with people trying to get money from old widows or old gentlemen or elder brothers, as in the Relapse, which is an interesting thing to me immediately, because money is very material, obviously. It's a desire for possessions, or a need for possessions, is something which is very solid, substantial, and creates enormous drives in people. And immediately one starts to think about that, the idea, the notion of Restoration comedy in the vulgar sense, which was something I was sort of brought up on, was that it was all fans and periwigs and beauty spots and people saying la and stat me vitals all the time. And in a way, though all that may also be part of Restoration comedies, the economic motive sings out loud and clear. The plays are reactions, just as the Restoration itself was a reaction. And one of the ways in which, one of the things they reacted against, obviously, was, well, for a start, the fact that the theatres were closed. And almost all the Restoration comedies, in my opinion, derive an amazing energy from the sense of shackles being thrown off. One of the other things that the theatre was celebrating was the pleasure in clothes, and, of course, perhaps one might say, above all, sexual license. But these features that we're talking about now, the sexual motive, the liberation, the satirical notion, and the money, the economic motive, are to do with sensuous, physical, material needs. And they're not, except in very specific instances of caricature, epicene in any way. They're nothing to do with, they're not to do with decadence of manners. I mean, we'll talk about it more when we come to Lord Foppington, but that's a very strong feeling that I have about the character of the fop in this play. The fops, once again, we have a lot of very handed down ideas about what Restoration comedies are like. And the idea of the fop, we have an idea of some sort of pantaloon, some sort of androgynous, maybe absurd, grotesque figure. But in fact, there are fops and fops, but there's a whole range of foppery that you can go through, like from A to Z. And the kind of fop that we're thinking of had very specific names, like the Macaronis, who wore these extraordinary, etiolated, sort of rather Fellini-like things, like Fellini's vision of decadence, who had long fingernails and could hardly walk, in fact, because they were so burdened down with exaggerations. But That's not what Lord Foppington's about at all, as I hope we'll see.
When we say restoration, are we talking about a style of acting? I mean, is there just one style of acting one can use when one's doing these plays?
Well, that's absolutely what we need to find out. It's my opinion that style is a very abused and misunderstood word also.
I don't know what it means, really.
Well, the very best definition of style, which is a very famous one, but it's one that I think is one of the most important things ever said about the theatre. It was John Gielgud's definition of it, which is style is knowing what kind of play you're in. And although that sort of begs questions as well, it does draw attention to an absolutely central fact, which is that every play is a world of its own, and that what we should always be looking for every time we approach a play is to find out in what way it's different from every other play, rather than in what way it's the same. So in answer to your question, is there a style? No, but I think one could say that if you worked on a large number of plays from the same period, you would discover certain common factors between them, which are a very useful base to understand in terms of, for example, the energy factor required for a play, or indeed the way in which language is used, the kind of focus on language, which is something that varies so much from one period to another. Could you say in as clear a narrative sense as possible what happens in the scene that you're about to read?
The scene begins with him praising his life in the country and saying how wonderful this change has taken place, obvious in his life from what he was to this. He's become a purified person.
Yeah.
And the reason for it all is Amanda. Is that right?
I agree.
And he spends a lot of the scene convincing her of this total change of character that's taken place.
Yeah.
And that, and it begins with him saying, well, we'll have this trip to London that I've got to do. We'll have it as a sort of trial for my virtue. I'll prove to you. I'll put my virtue on the line. I'll let it go into all these temptations.
Yeah.
And you'll be absolutely convinced.
What kind of temptation?
He's going to go to his old drinking cronies. He's going to sort of booze it up there. He's going to go to the plays. He's going to... he's very quiet about his sex thing, which I think is the big thing with him.
It is, among all the Restoration comedies, the one I would think which deals most intensely with sex. I mean, it seems that every single scene in the play is to do with sex in one form or another. Could I just ask you one thing? You said who Lovelace was, but you didn't say what Lovelace was.
What Lovelace?
Yes, what is Lovelace?
He's a man that... you mean his occupation?
Well...
When you say what is Lovelace, I mean, what do you mean, what is Lovelace?
What I'm driving at is this. I think we all ask, when we come to play characters, who they are, in the sense of what are their characteristics, what kind of people are they, what sort of, are they mercurial or stoical or whatever. We look for the qualities of their personality. But I think something that we frequently miss out on is what they are, in the sense of what is their defining character, their defining status, shall we say. So if we say, if you were to say, you can't say it of Lovelace, but he is a soldier, that would be that's nothing to do with his personality, that's to do with what he is. Mm. Or if you said he was a lawyer, I don't mean, though, entirely his profession. He could be, I
think he's socially acceptable. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
I think you could invite Lovelace to the best dinners. He would be well behaved.
Right, so if you possibly can, try to crystallize that into a noun. Because it's useful. It helps to clarify it.
I don't know. I can't.
So a man about town, for example?
I can't box up his whole character in one noun.
No, I don't. No, that's absolutely what I don't want you to do. I don't want you. You can't box up his character, but you can box up the outlines of him. Could we just call him a gentleman?
I'll settle for that, yes.
No, but I mean, yes.
I mean, that leaves me a lot of scope, Simon.
Well, it's a very, very, very important thing to say about someone. If you say someone's a gentleman as opposed to a commoner or an aristocrat, then you've said a lot. You've said a bundle. So let's read that scene then, if you like.
How true is that philosophy which says our heaven is seated in our minds. Through all the roving pleasures of my youth, where nights and days seemed all consumed in joy, where the false face of luxury displayed such charms as might have shaken the most holy hermit and made him totter at his altar, I never knew one moment's peace like this. Here, in this little soft retreat, my thoughts unbent from all the cares of life, content with fortune, eased from the grating duties of dependence, from envy free, ambition underfoot, the raging flame of wild, destructive lust, reduced to a warm, pleasing fire of lawful love. My life glides on, and all is well within. Enter Amanda.
It seems to me, one interesting thing that was probably very clear when people heard it, but still needs to be said, is that unusually in Restoration text, it's in verse. And in this instance, what it seems to me to give is a mellifluousness and a formality, a certain formality, a certain mellifluousness. The mellifluousness, I suggest, creates a kind of sensuous feeling, and possibly an emotional feeling, you know, a sensuous and emotional feeling. So as he's expanding, certainly in his soliloquy. And I think I would suggest to you that when he talks to us about the country, that there is a kind of intense voluptuousness about it, and which brings me to suggest to you my noun for what he is. He is a voluptuary. That's what Lovelace is. He's a man who is in enormous sensuous contact with everything. And so, like many people when they give things up, the only way it can work for them is if they kind of fall in love with having given something up. But if you show him as an enormously voluptuous person, the audience, we in the audience, will think, well, how long is this going to last? Because, you know, if he's so susceptible to sensual stimuli, if he's so in love with the country in this kind of yielding way, he could quite easily fall in love with something else. It seems to me that, for example, you could, another writer might have written him as having renounced it completely and said, I will no longer wearing black, you know, but he hasn't said that at all.
No.
He says, oh, it's so wonderful being pure. it's very, very indulged. And then I think some comedy comes into it. Because, you know, which is the source of most comedy, there is a gap between the way the character perceives himself and the way we perceive him. I would like you very much, if you could, to say that speech. This is more actually for the line of the action than anything else. To Pamela, as your best friend, in a coffee house. No, let's say this. Your best friends come up to stay for the weekend in your country house, and it's, 2 o'clock in the morning, and Amanda's gone to bed, and you say to your best friend, Pamela, I want you to be a man now. And you just
She could
say...
be a woman? I mean,
yeah,
I know what you mean.
Maybe complicated a bit. If you say, you just say, you've no idea how wonderful my life is. It'd be interesting to see what,
Using the text?
Absolutely.
how true is that philosophy which says, our heaven is seated in our minds? Through all the roving pleasures of my youth, when nights and days seemed all consumed in joy, where the false face of luxury displayed such charms as might have shaken the most holy hermit and made him totter at his altar, I never knew one moment's peace like this. Here, I'm in this little retreat, my thoughts unbent from all the cares of life. I'm content with fortune, eased from the grating duties of dependence, from envy free, ambition underfoot. The raging flame of wild, destructive lust reduced to a warm, pleasing fire of lawful love. My life glides on, and all is well within.
Well, it sounds good to me. It sounds like it's the man who's sold up and given up the business and gone to Wales and bought a cottage and oh, no, I don't have to go to the dole anymore.
Don't believe him, though.
Exactly. It's so wonderful, not to have to worry about learning parts or getting jobs or ever speaking to agents. I mean, this is it, Up at 4 o'clock in the morning, feeding the pigs, and you can, and you know that he'll be in London, in 6 months. But the more now, as this question of language is absolutely at the centre of these plays. You, in order to achieve that, which I found immediately, the speech began to kind of engage with us, rather than, one so often has a feeling when one sees actors, one kind of thinks, oh yes, that kind of acting now, yes, yeah, okay, got it. And you sort of start thinking about something else until the next thing happens. But there, one was engaged absolutely minute by minute, thinking, what is that he's turned his back on, and so on. But you, because of the sort of setup that I'd given you, you sort of brought it down, in a sense. But I think you should try to conceive of it, if we're talking about sensuousness, and he's almost boasting, but he's really indulging it at the same time.
Define what you mean when you say sensuousness.
Well, I mean to say when all your senses are heightened and engaged. When you feel that your sense of taste, your sense of touch, your sense of hearing are all heightened. And one of the things that I've found really surprisingly releasing is just to imagine myself drunk before I go on stage. Just imagine myself in that kind of, the lovely moment of drunkenness, when the whole balance between inner and outer becomes completely merged, and you're just, everything you say sounds really great to you.
I'm a teetotaler, I don't...
Well, I would like to find, and I think you should try to find, what turns you on.
It's all mental, isn't it?
No.
It's got to come from thought, whatever it is.
No. The warmth of the Mediterranean isn't to do with thought. We're assuming here that you've been cast as Lovelace. And there must be in you, because I truly believe that we are all everything. But sometimes we have to, really send down a bucket deep, deep, deep down into the well, to get it up. And it may be very exhausting to do.
But you can give me an idea. You can tell me, look, I would suggest this to you, and I'll do it. I don't need to experience it particularly, do I?
I've got an idea for him.
Yes?
Can I whisper it?
Please. Sound?
I've never done that in my life. What an extraordinary thing to say.
Oh, that's no. Shall I tell you what I suggested?
Yes.
Oh, yes, please.
I suggested his wife has the most beautiful hair that she always wears up.
Yes.
And I saw it down once in a dressing room.
Yes.
And she looked like Rapunzel. So I suggested that he think of brushing her hair.
Yeah, he's never done that.
And he's never done
No,
it.
I mean, the point is that it seems to me that speech is absolutely constructed, quite deliberately. As it happens, it is no great piece of writing. It's no great piece of verse at all. But it is just our introduction to J. Lovelace, Esquire, whatever it is. Lovelace is presented to us immediately in a conjunction of vowels and consonants which is mellifluous, to say the least. What's the most mellifluous thing you can think of?
Mozart, I suppose.
Yes.
I mean, music.
Right. You might not find this music that I want to play sensuous, but we'll see. Okay? So it's just back here. It's by Ravel. That's right. Let's. There are several different ways of going about this, but let's just, for the hell of it, see if I play this very gently underneath your performance of the. I'll just turn it around so we can hear it better. Might just do something. Just absolutely in your time.
How true is that philosophy which says, our heaven is seated in our minds. Through all the roving pleasures of my youth, when nights and days seemed all consumed in joy, where the false face of luxury displayed such charms as might have shaken the most holy hermit and made him totter at his altar, I never knew one moment's peace like this. Here, in this little soft retreat, my thoughts unbent from all the cares of life, content with fortune, eased from the grating duties of dependence, from envy free, ambition underfoot, the raging flame of wild, destructive lust reduced to a warm, pleasing fire of lawful love. My life glides on, and all is well within.
Well, that's very interesting, I think, because it's fascinating, isn't it?
Lovely.
It really transforms it. And one may say, well, it's gone too far in one direction or whatever. But what, to me, the most important thing that happened to you there, you absolutely did indulge in a completely different way to the way you'd indulged before. But the most important thing of all was when you listened, when you allowed it to come into you, and out of that silence, whenever you just paused, out of that silence, your new approach to the next line was so different to what you've been doing before. And in a sense, I mean, it's a big, crucial question with very text-bound, text-orientated plays. We have to find a way not to be dominated by the text and kind of desperately whipping it up into life, driving it on, whatever. But to find some way, and it very often is done by having something inside one. It's like a kind of, like a ball, like one of those jets of water, where the ball is bubbling on the top. The little ball is the text. And you have to supply the jet. You have to supply the inner world of emotion that is holding that up. The object of the whole thing is to get away from any of our words. I tend to think of text as something which should be almost, I like to think of text as being located in one's belly, like a great spool of words or film almost, located in one's belly and spinning up through one's brain, going up through, and it passes through one's brain. So as you see You see, as it were, imagine it as a piece of film. You see the image as it goes past the face, but you don't see the spool. You don't see you just see the image passes through the actor all the time. And that sense of the performance passing through one is I think, the certain sign that something remarkable is happening in one's role, you know, that you've got, when it starts to have a life of its own, you know. That's the thing. And for me, that immediately began to do that. One of the things that makes the Relapse such an extraordinarily fascinating play is that it's a sequel to a play by another writer. The play is, and I tell you, its relationship to that play is a subject for much academic discussion, but which is nonetheless quite relevant to us, because the play is Love's Last Shift by Colley Cibber, who was an actor-playwright, in which several of the characters that we find in the Relapse make their first appearance. Lovelace, Amanda, Worthy by another name, and above all, the character called Sir Novelty Fashion. And he's the fop, and he, Cibber's very witty invention that he, trying to outstrip all the other fops, had the biggest wig in London made for him, and it was so big that it had to be brought on in a sedan chair. That was his business. Vanbrugh was as everybody knows, was a great architect, and subsequently built Blenheim Palace and so on, but had been a soldier during the period of exile of the king. Had spent about 3 years in the Bastille. Came back to London. Very keen to make his mark on the scene, and saw the play of Cibber and said, well, I'll write a sequel. It's not as uncommon as it seems to us. It was quite usual for somebody to take up a character and carry on with it. This is the only one of any note. But he decided, I think very wittily, to make Sir Novelty Fashion a lord, to elevate him to the House of Lords. And so that's how he becomes Lord Foppington. And there are many characters in Restoration plays who, there's no one like Lord Foppington, ever. None of the others. The man of mode is definitely a silly man. Sir Fopling Flutter is, as you say, yes, exactly how his name suggests. Oh, he's all about faint, and he is a very emotional kind of hysteric. But Foppington apparently is he's untroubled, completely untroubled. And there's something about the announcement of the epigrams.
They need to be...
Well, what they need to be, it's very difficult. They need to be
placed.
Propounded, I suppose, is the word I wanted. They need to be, every single element of them needs to be held and understood. Now, Bill Gaskill, who directed the production that I was in, is held to be great authority about Restoration comedies. And I have to say that when I worked with him, he was wonderfully helpful in the area of text. It was also a help that he'd worked with Edith Evans when he directed her in Richard III, and had learnt a great deal from her. And he said something to me which is one of the most useful things that anybody has said to me about acting. It applies more to Restoration comedy or its equivalent, comedy of it could apply to Oscar Wilde as well, comedy of epigram. Yes. Edith Evans had the great gift of articulating each section of the phrase, and as it were, placing it on a shelf in front of her, to which she joined the next section, and then the one after it, and then the very last one to make the whole phrase, so as it seemed to hover in the air, and you saw everything. And it's an amazingly different sensation to the way we normally phrase, because normally we find the center of the phrase and we blah, 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 up to it, we kind of pick it up and then we blah, 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 away from it. But in this kind of text, it's almost lapidary, it's almost like chiseled on stone. The energy has to go right through to the end of the line, but you can't do it by driving through it. It's entirely different in feeling, for example, to Shakespeare, this. where the line has a sort of momentum which takes you, so like as the waves make towards the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end. It takes you round and round with it. There's a kind of nonsense which has crept up in recent years that we're not really supposed to listen to other actors the way that they have handled the problems. I think we should always learn from our fellow actors, and Edith Evans was absolutely supreme in this area. And so I have a record of her playing in Way of the World, which I would like to play as an exact exemplification, because I can't do it well enough to really make my point. But I'd just like to play Edith Evans.
I think I must resolve, after all, not to have you. We shan't agree. And yet our distemper, in all likelihood, will be the same, for we shall be sick of one another. I shan't endure to be reprimanded nor instructed. 'Tis so dull to act always by advice, and so tedious to be told of one's faults. I can't bear it. Well, I won't have you, Mirabelle. I'm resolved, I think. You may go. What would you give that you could help loving me?
I think that does really rather make the point that Bill Gaskill was making very clearly. She gives each phrase its absolutely full value, and then places another phrase by it. And then she can undercut with something like, I think.
Yes.
Having floated all these things. And I mean, one can, that is a kind of intellectual energy. And I think that one of the greatest requirements for the playing of Restoration comedy is that kind of sustained thinking, not obviously by any means what passes very often for thinking on stage, or indeed in life, of kind of the furrowed brow, but just the continuous thinking down the center of the word and the thought, which is exhausting. I mean, I think that acting which requires thinking is the most exhausting of all. You find exactly the same thing in American comedies, Broadway comedies. It's a kind of, normally, again, we mentioned Shakespeare or whatever, you have very often in plays a kind of spread, a kind of emotional spread, which is very renewing. It gives you energy. It's a sort of lubricant for the whole thing. But American comedies of the 20s, 30s, 40s, even right up till now, playing a playwright like Bernard Slade or something, you've got, there's no recovery at all. The brain has to be continuously engaged.
So I am your most humble sort.
I wish you joy, my lord.
Larza. Madam, your ladyship's welcome to talk.
Shall we just say a word, Michael, here? Now, I'd like to say two things. One is that I don't want to sound really as if I was laying down a law about this, because it's nothing. But it just strikes me that the laughter that you're using there is to some extent the laughter of a man not completely sure of himself.
I see. Yes, undercuts his...
You know?
Yes.
Personally, I think that people of such utter splendour as Lord Foppington, really, laughing is a little bit extreme, a rather exhausting kind of movement to perform, an unnecessary expenditure of muscular energy.
Yellowing teeth.
Yes, exactly. Some kind of... Because his whole purpose in life is to show...
Yes, I take your point. Yeah.
Exactly, good.
You can tell me about gnats and knots.
Yes, there's this peculiar and wonderful feature of the part which Vanbrugh took from Colley Cibber's performance, though it isn't written in the play. In Love's Last Shift, it isn't written. But obviously, Colley Cibber invented this idea of all these peculiar vowels of Lord Foppington. And they're very precisely noted down. but quite unusually so. And they're mostly they're completely arbitrary.
Yes.
And he says that you've done, for example, torn instead of town, and as we know in the first speech, he says his famous expletive, "Stop my vitals." He says, "Stap my vitals," and he calls his brother Tom Tam, and it's obviously an affectation of one that he's decided on. He's just going to impose it, and he does it, and I think he does it with that peculiar quality, that's a gift that certain people have, of saying a mispronunciation absolutely as if they were right and the entire rest of the world was wrong.
Yes.
And it pays off brilliantly in the text itself, where I think they talk about his father having died because he shot himself through the head. And he says, yes, our father is dead. He shat himself. Okay, so just two from that line again.
You've done well to engage a second, my dear. For here comes one will apt to call you to account for your country principles.
Sir, I am your most humble servant.
I wish you joy, my lord.
Oh, Lord, sir. Madam, your ladyship's welcome to Torn.
I wish your lordship joy.
Oh, heavens, madam.
My lord, this young lady is a relation of my wife's.
The beautifulest race on earth, rack me. Dear Lovelace, I'm overjoyed to see that you have brought your family to Torn again. I am stab me vitals, for I design to lie with your wife.
Michael, I think that's I like the simplicity and the strength of that. I think that the more you expand vocally, you know, the kind of splendor of your diction, rather than the sort of, you don't need to use so much weight, is what I mean. He has a natural weight, but there's no need to, you know, engineer weight at all. Just, you should almost, you know, be a massive thing that floats, like a sort of barrage balloon, or one of those things hanging over London, you know, saying Goodyear tires. You sort of float in on a cloud of ecstasy, you know, yes.
I think books the best entertainment in the world.
I am so much of your ladyship's mind, madam, that I have a private gallery, wherein I walk sometimes, is furnished with nothing but books and looking-glasses. Madam, I have gilded them and ranged them so prettily that before gad, it is the most entertaining thing in the world to walk and look upon them.
We need to see this place that you're talking about. I have a gallery furnished with nothing but books and looking-glasses. We need to, you know,
Yes.
suddenly, you know, we need to suddenly get the picture of that place instead of, you know, this is the real lure of Restoration comedy or comedy of language in this way, is that we sort of fall in love with the words and the language, and we start making shapes with the language. But it's a picture, a dead simple picture, actually, but a brilliant one. I've got a gallery with nothing but books and looking-glasses in it. It's my favorite place in the world. I mean, it's, you know, we need to...
You tell the story.
Always. But we go from image to image to image in speech. You know, we you know, it's a sequence of images, really, that we're offering the audience, and they must see them, and they only see them if we see them. Okay, let's just go to the last line of the books and the looking-glasses.
Madam, I have gilded them and ranged them so prettily before gad. It is the most entertaining thing in the world to walk and look upon them.
Nay, I love a neat library too. But 'tis, I think, the inside of the book should recommend it most to us.
That, I must confess, I'm not altogether so fond of. To mind the inside of a book is to entertain oneself with the forced product of another man's brain. Now, I think a man of quality and breeding may be much better diverted with the natural sports of his own.
Good. You know, it's a wonderful thing that it's a very, almost a rather radical thing that he says there. He says, I don't think one should read books, because that means you interfere with your originality? Well, it's arguable, you know. So,
Yes, there's
and everything that, almost everything that Lord Foppington says is...
He
it's-
believes it.
Not only does he believe it, but it is not silly either. If you take his starting proposition, which is to say that life should really be the celebration of one's own excellence, take that as the starting point, everything else follows.
Sir, I am your most humble servant.
I wish you joy, my lord.
No lard, sir. Madam, your ladyship's welcome to Taunton.
I wish your lordship joy.
Heavens, madam.
My lord, this young lady is a relation of my wife's.
The beautifulest race of people upon earth. Dear Lovelace, I'm overjoyed to see you have brought your family to Taunton again. I am...
Michael, may I, this is rude, right? Brace yourself. But you're offering, you're showing us a bourgeois man. What you're doing is not, for my money, sufficiently upper class. There's a kind of quality, it's I think probably a vocal thing more than anything else. The kind of vocal pitch that you've chosen is somehow rather fuzzy. It isn't like exactly. If you just listen to the absolute the way in which this lovely bright golden tone cuts through is of the trumpet. There's something not. I mean, the one should.
Something bourgeois about that.
Exactly. It's terribly open and free and splendid. And it may just be something to do with your conception of the character that you have as being rather older than perhaps he needs to be. He's only Tom's older brother. He may only be 5 years older than him, you know. So, that's interesting. Michael, if you could just take the... Let's just try it. Just see if it's possible for you to play the scene without the words. If you see what I mean. Just parade. If you could fling lines at him from time to time to say, my Lord Foppington, or you look wonderful, or whatever you feel like, you know, and he'll just interchange with them. It's a little promenade, you know, a little ballet, really. Just to get the feeling. It's above all, the place you have to get the feeling of the music is in your spine. So as you've got the kind, it takes you forward like this. Not up here and not here. Not in your thighs or in your feet, but here, so as it really is leading you forward, as if there was a kind of thread coming from your belly like this and taking you backwards and forwards, and so as you obey the music, okay?
And we're just sort of ad-libbing it.
Yes, it's just a little promenade.
My lord!
Sir! Good morning to you.
So pleased to meet you, my lord.
Please. Sir, I am your humble servant.
I wish you joy, my lord.
No lard, sir.
Michael, just say, sir, I am your faithful servant as yourself. Yes, I know.
Sir, I am your most humble servant.
I wish you joy, my lord.
Lard, sir. Madam, your ladyship's welcome to Taunton.
I wish your lordship
That's
joy.
not quite as yourself, Michael, if I may say so.
Well, I don't know what my... that's it, is it? Yes, it's just putting on a perf, isn't it, each time? Very difficult, very difficult.
I know.
Shake it, rinse it out. I'm going to do something camp in a minute, I can feel it coming up.
Well, as Charles Norton, in similar circumstances, said, when a director of Ruggles and Red Gap said to him, Charles, do you have to be so goddamn Nancy? And he said, my dear fellow, after 5 o'clock, a bit of it's bound to show. This is also something that I overheard Milos Forman say to Roy de Tries when we were filming Amadeus. Milos Forman has a theory that acting is not required in films. And he likes it on the stage, but he just says, no acting. There will be no acting in my films. And one day, Roy de Vries was doing some acting, and Milo said, no, Roy, no, you are always acting. So Roy said, all right, okay, fine. So then he did it again, and Milo said, no, now you are acting, not acting. Where do you come from, Michael?
Part of the country?
Yeah.
Devonshire.
And what kind of an accent did you have as a lad?
Only it was always very public school and prep school, bright, you know. I can do a very good Devonshire accent, but it isn't.
That's
I've
not
never used.
No. Well, just try Lord Foppington public school and right.
Right. Yeah.
Just have a little go of it.
Yes.
Might be amusing. Go on, let's have...
Sir, I'm your most humble servant.
I wish you joy, my lord.
Oh, Lord, sir. Madam, your ladyship's welcome to Torn.
I wish your lordship joy.
Heavens, madam.
My lord, this young lady is a relation of my wife's.
The beautifulest race of people upon earth rack me. Dear Lovelace, I'm so overjoyed to see that you've brought your family to Torn again. I am. Snap the vitals. For I design... Oh, no. I design to lie with his wife. Too young for it, really, but I'll have a crack.
Now, I found that wonderfully interesting because, you know, as always, very often with these things, designed as that was to just knock you off your centre and suddenly throw you into something else. It's fascinating because the greatest gain in it is not in the way you use the text, but in when you're not with the text. Because suddenly you really are someone, you know.
Yes.
You're sort of listening and taking it all in. And then after a while, as always happens, it's not a criticism of you at all, that it starts, you know, you started then to cleverly be doing, as it were, the performance you did before, but with a slightly different voice, whereas when you started to adopt that public school boy, you completely possessed by him. Yeah. And he was running the show, and you were riding along.
6 lines,
on the crest of the wave. Yes.
God.
One does. You know, because apart from anything else, it's sort of completely wrong for Lord Foppington. But that's really not, in a way, the point. The point is that a character, and Lord Foppington is, you know, sublimely a character, one of the great characters of world dramatic literature, is something that you have to give in to, not something you have to do.
Yes, yeah.
Would it be a terrible idea if Simon had to go at Lord Foppington? I mean, I know it'd be terribly unfair on Simon and terribly unfair on Michael, because if Michael had 3 weeks rehearsal, then he'd be brilliant as Lord Foppington. Simon has played it, but hasn't played it for 5 years. I mean, would that be an interesting position?
Hold on.
Great professional.
I would be most privileged to watch it. I mean,
no, I mean, honestly, it's. I'm so far away from it and so on that I couldn't possibly give any kind of account of the role, but I could perhaps give just indicate by doing it how I think that the text, the kind of movement of it. My life, madam, is a perpetual stream of pleasure that glides through such a variety of entertainments. I believe the wisest of our ancestors never had the least conception of any of them. I rise, madam, about 10 o'clock. I don't rise sooner because just the worst thing in the world for the complexion. Not that I pretend to be a beau, but a man must endeavour to look wholesome, lest he make so nauseous a figure in the side box. The ladies should be compelled to turn their eyes upon the play. So, at 10 o'clock, I say, I rise. No, if I find 'tis a good day, I resolve to take a turn in the park and see the fine women. So I huddle on my clothes and I get dressed by 1 o'clock. If it be nasty weather, I take a turn in the chocolate horse, where as you walk, madam, you have the prettiest prospect in the world. You have looking glasses all around you. But I begin to tire the company. Why then, ladies, from thence I go on to dinner at Lackett's, where you are so nicely and delicately served that, stab my vitals, they shall compose you a dish no bigger than a saucer shall come to 50 shillings. Between eating my dinner and washing my mouth, ladies, I spend my time till I go to the play, when, till 9 o'clock, I entertain myself with looking upon the company, and then, usually dispose of 1 hour more in leading 'em out. So there's 12 out of the 24 pretty well over. The other 12, madam, are disposed of in 2 articles. In the first 4, I toast myself drunk, and in t'other 8, I sleep myself sober again. Thus, ladies, you see, my life is an eternal round-o of pleasures. You did that to me. Get over there. Well, look.
But Simon, what
Yes.
came out of that was the wonderful courage that you had, not just from doing it, but just to take your time
that's the
and
thing,
let
yes.
the sentences
Huge.
drive
It's
themselves.
that's the big thing.
That is kind of what you have to do, and it's but the curious thing is that even in that excruciating pain of doing that there, well, you do feel the intellectual energy. If you're really thinking through each line, if you as it were push the line out, it'll create its own energy.
Yes.
It's like, pushing something down a track. You can push it down like that, and you can really watch it go and pick it up where you want it to. So it's like almost everything, in a way, that I've been saying about all this, which applies to me to all acting in general, is that it's the inner kind of energy that you find, whether it's emotional or intellectual or even sensuous, that is the thing that will sustain the text. And if you climb onto the back of the text, it'll collapse under your feet. The text should ride like a little jockey on top of the horse, so as it's revealed for us all. You can't look to it to save you or to give you energy. You've got to help it. It's like partnering in a pas de deux,
I wondered if you'd care to say a bit about asides, because they seem always to be a problem, and also about what the other actors are supposed to be doing while they're going on.
Yes, I mean, what they are is very simple to answer. How to handle them is rather hard. What they are is simply moments in which the characters on stage leave the action and talk to the audience. As I said, it would certainly in a Restoration comedy, one would assume that in a sense the character, and it's important, it's the character, not the actor, of course. The character is talking to his contemporaries, really. He's talking to people who know all about him and all about his world. And it's a convention which very frankly says, we're in a theatre. You are here. It's the opposite of the so-called, the famous fourth wall that Diderot prescribed as really the ideal condition for theatre. The difficulty for the actor is to decide to cast the audience, Who's the audience? Who are they playing? I mean, here you all are, however many of you there are, and you're all absolutely different people. You have different experiences of life. How does one how does one talk to you all? You know, how do you find an intimate relation? Because the assumption of the aside always is that the character is telling the truth to the audience. No matter what he's saying to anybody else, he is telling the truth about his motives and his intentions and his inner thoughts to the audience. But that really doesn't answer for anybody the question of what the other characters do on stage. It's a very difficult business, because you have to sustain the inner life of whatever you're doing and sustain the relationships without enacting any kind of pantomime, because it's not exactly like a frieze. That would be something quite different. It's life goes on, you know, but those producers who have chosen to have the characters, you know, whizzing about, little kind of choreographies going on in the background during the sides, in my opinion, really betray the convention, because the glory of it is that you step right outside of the frame. It's a fascinating device. Yes?
Do you think it's important for a Restoration play to be actually set within the Restoration period, or do you think it's possible for any other era to be suitable for a play such as the Relapse?
Yes, I just don't know, really. I confess that there was a horrible wave in the mid-60s and early 70s when everybody thought, swinging London is the same as the Restoration. That's, you know, it's exactly the same world. So everybody suddenly appeared in Carnaby Street costumes. They are called it's a slight generalization, but within reason, they are called comedies of manners. And the manners of the period are so precise. It is that society which is precisely being anatomized. It relates to, you know, the way of life of London of that time. I think it's at your peril that you transfer it to any other period.
Think of Restoration comedies. Do they have any meaning for us today, or are they merely charming period pieces nowadays, do you think?
I think that they are a demonstration of the way in which a society lived its life. And therefore, that's always of value to us, because we can test our own arrangements against it. But more important than that, in a sense, is that they are bursting with life. And what we have to do is to restore them to that life. That's all. And it is life. It is the giving and the restoring of life that is the job of the theatre. So yes, they're worth doing. Restoration comedies are bursting with life. And it is life, it is the giving and the restoring of life that is the job of the theatre.